All right, everyone. The other day, the Italian foreign minister was giving a speech. Link in the description. It's just a tweet, so not archived, of course, in which he said that he called for the formation of a European army. That is a central fighting force within Europe. The European Union currently maintains its own military power in the individual states. So there's the French military, the German military, etc., etc., etc. But there are a few logistic problems, reasons why this wouldn't work. Number one, throughout Europe, you've already got the breakdown of the post-nationalistic civic sentiment, it seems, of Europeanism. And so the European Union is already hazarded by constant protests and movements to devolve more power to its member states, or dissolve membership in individual states' cases, like the Italexit or Nexit sort of idea. That's beginning to become more common. I think the reason why is because of the plethora of European political movements and different cultures, etc., different languages, common currency, but who cares? What ends up happening is that people on the left and on the right, I think, are both disliking the project because they don't want to work with one another. People who are more populistic or conservative are dealing with policies that are more left-leaning. People that are on the far left are dealing with policies that to them are far right. We've got the same basic premise in the United States, but the thing is the states are unified for several reasons that the European Union doesn't have as an advantage. Firstly, it was incepted under its constitution long ago. Now, of course, there were several states that were added as recently as the 1940s. But by and large, the United States is pretty much cohesive whole for more than a century. Secondly, there is a common language. And this is why, the big reason why I don't think a European army would work was that it would require a lingua franca for those forces. Now, many Europeans speak English, but the proportion that speak English, at least fluently, is not going to be the same depending on where you are in Europe. You will find that the average Dutch person is fluent in English, for example. It's a fully bilingual culture by and large, especially in any of the urban centers. Only a few people I ever interacted with didn't speak at least fully conversational English. If I go, however, to Croatia, I would expect to find fewer English speakers, fewer people that are fully fluent in English. Are you going to use a national language from outside of European continental region, specifically Great Britain and its diaspora, as your lingua franca to train and command troops as part of this military? Because otherwise what it sounds like is just beefing up European military power. Why don't you simply allocate more funds, collectively agreed upon, to the member states and let them have their own military forces and then just coordinate them? You know, have language training courses for commanders and stuff like that, so that when they're guiding their troops and stuff, you know, they're capable of communicating with each other and with HQ, have that greater coordination. Having a singular European military doesn't really make sense. The very concept of being European is a small minority view of people within the European Union anyway. The vast majority of these people, when polled, refer to themselves first and foremost and often only as individuals with loyalty to their member states. The average person in the Netherlands says, well, I'm Dutch. They don't say, well, I'm a European. Well, I mean, you are, but, you know, first and foremost, you're from the Netherlands. You speak Dutch and eat bitterballen. You're not from Austria. You're not from Hungary or something like that. These nations not too long ago were at open war with each other on a regular basis. Never-ending spiraling wars over and over again, with brief interludes of peace in between. And all the peasants were hoping society would just fucking collapse so they could be left alone to farm their potatoes for a while since they weren't doing anything else anyway. I just don't think that the proposal would in the end work. And also, if you have this hodgepodge of people from different backdrops all throwing in together, again, somehow coordinating with each other without using a foreign lingua franca, it's going to be difficult. I mean, English is the main second language in the world. So you'd have a higher chance of making this successful, but then people would, especially the European nationalists, would point out, well, why isn't it a European language? Or are you going to use like Esperanto? Something like that. I think cross-training is perfectly good. It's a good idea, and a lot of the European countries probably should put more money into defense spending because, quite clearly, there are some problems going on in the world. That would be a good thing for those member states to do. But then the public would probably complain about that. Well, you had to cut the welfare programs in order to pay for more tanks, and then the left would protest because they tend to be more on the anti-war side in the European sense. In the United States, it appears to have flipped, and now a bunch of conservatives are the anti-war movement. Very, very strange bedfellows being made in politics in the United States today. But the old guard, like punk rock left, is still alive and well in Europe, and they're not really happy about what's going on, I think, in Ukraine, for the most part. Don't seem too happy about what's happening in the Middle East. Sure, they wouldn't be happy to see what's going to happen between Venezuela and Guyana if things pop off there, because that would be a fucking massacre. And it would involve the U.S. and the U.K., by the way. Oh, goody, goody. But I think that, that would be the only proposal that would really make sense, but you'd still want to coordinate things within your nations. And by the way, I happen to be against the whole experiment, generally speaking, other than the ability of people within Europe itself to traverse borders freely. When I was over there in the Netherlands, of course, I'm a resident, but I wasn't born in Europe. I'm an American, so, it's a little bit different. Having countries that are friendly towards your alliance, having easier travel, it is good, and travel and trade. But then you get the issue of the external border being opened up to people who don't ever assimilate into any of the cultures that are there, causing problems. Then if you shut off the spigot, there will be other people who complain, why aren't we taking more asylum seekers? Because these people need somewhere to go, and we're decadent Europeans, so we have to do it for them. It's a mess. It's like night and day. Even if you go across the border between the Netherlands and Germany, for example, you're going to Enschede to Hronau or something, you notice a startling difference in basically everything. The way people act, certainly the language they tend to be speaking at the time, the fucking architecture, the road rules to a certain extent, everything's different. How are these societies supposed to coordinate in a military fashion in the most direct sense? Unless they're commanding their own troops and then there's like a central hub that's, advising and coordinating their movements or something like that. And what's the point? Several of the world's more powerful militaries are in the region anyway. France still has nuclear weapons, for example. Greece has a shit ton of tanks, and so on and so on forth. You've also got the problem where you're trying to get Turkey into the EU at large, which may or may not happen. I think that the coordination there would be a little bit of a problem, especially since the United States has nuclear weapons fielded there, or at least we did. Now's not the time. Unless you want to establish a lingua franca there, I just don't see that this could possibly work. That's about all. Peace out.